Okay, let's begin.
Good morning, Patriot listeners. You are tuned into Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. This is Susan Smith, and I am here with Jeremy Munson and William Beck, a candidate for Minnesota House seat 41B. Before we get started, I just want to make a couple comments. Obviously the whole country is reeling from the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I just want to say, for me, that there's a lot of discussion now on both sides. Some of it's reactionary. Some of it is really reflective of Charlie Kirk. I believe Charlie Kirk was fearless. He knew the risks. He knew absolutely the risks he was taking every time he went out in public. But he believed in free speech. He believed in honoring other people's right to speak freely. He answered every question honestly. And his number one message to people regularly was, you need Jesus in your life. He was a man of faith, profound faith, and faith led him to try and be the most ethical person he could be. And the assassination of a person who really did listen to all of his detractors with respect. He was not a guy who attacked people. He challenged them with loving responses about how he believed they could best live their life, find the happiness that we all have the right to pursue. And I really am saddened every time I hear people distort or misrepresent what he really did, how he really lived his life. And I do think that we are going to see, I think that he was martyred, and I think you're going to see people of all faiths begin to look differently at how we are dealing with the suppression of speech. Charlie Kirk was right. We need to be fearless. Nobody should not say what they believe. Everybody should have the right to speak their mind. And if you don't agree with them, you can ignore them or you can question them and do that civilly. We should all walk in Charlie Kirk's shoes. We should all try to be more like Charlie Kirk. And we 100% should never give up our freedom and our liberty to feel like we're protected. There are people with mental illness who are going to do terrible things. And we cannot let them stop us from exercising our liberties, and we cannot try and interfere with the liberties that other people have the right to also enjoy. So I will let Jeremy, certainly, you can speak to this issue as well, and so can you, William. But I felt like I wanted to say that, so sorry for taking some time. So Jeremy, you go ahead.
Susan, I echo everything you said. I met Charlie several years ago when we had him come to Mankato State in Mankato to speak. We had a great turnout. Turning Point USA is a wonderful organization, and not since Ron Paul have I seen a freedom-loving conservative engage so much with the youth in this country. Exactly. And it's sad. It's a sad loss. Somebody posted on Twitter that they killed the wrong guy. Like, of all the conservatives who might be targeted for speaking out, this is the person that had the most civil debates and conversations and engaging people and inviting people with differing opinions to come down and talk and had conversations with them. He was respectful, and this is what we need more of in this country. I have been out on social media the last day, kind of challenging some Republicans because the knee-jerk reaction, of course, from the left is gun control. From the right, it's censoring free speech. Representative Clay Higgins, who's a member of Congress, said he wants to use congressional authority and every influence with big tech platforms to mandate immediate ban for life every post or commenter that belittled the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That's what his tweet says verbatim. If they ran their mouth with their smart-ass hatred of celebrating the heinous murder of that beautiful young man, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it goes on, but he's basically advocating that Congress censor free speech. And as much as it frustrates the conservatives to see people out there celebrating the death of someone, an icon for our movement, we have to recognize freedom of speech. And Charlie Kirk, it would have been censored under a government that does this, right? I mean, we fought so much, 8-10 years ago to help conservatives get onto college campuses and give speeches and engage with people. And we have to protect freedom of speech. even in the wake of this and what we're seeing online from a handful of liberals.
Yeah.
Well, explain to us your kind of history with Turning Point and conservatives on college campuses.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be here, guys. I had never been out to the studio, so this is a lot of fun. But I wish it were under better circumstances, of course. Yeah, I was a Turning Point chapter president in college. That's where I really got my start in politics. And honestly, it was some of the best years of my life. I met so many great conservatives from across the nation. I've seen Charlie Kirk speak dozens of times. It was actually at a Turning Point conference that I first saw President Trump in person, which that was a fantastic experience. It's really sad that how some people are reacting to this. Jeremy, in response to what you said, I think this is the speech from the far left or folks who are celebrating. I think that's something that people need to see. I think we as Americans need to know who is celebrating the death of not a Republican, not a conservative, but a human being who had a family. It's shameful. I think people need to know that stuff is going on, that people are celebrating.
Right. I agree. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things about letting people speak their mind is then people do know what people are thinking. And if we don't know that, if we suppress it, right, then you just don't know who's who. And I want to know. I want to know who's who. I want my children to know who's who, because that's going to help us make better decisions about how we live our lives and how we educate people and how we provide testimony from a religious standpoint, that this all matters. It all matters, right?
Yeah. And, I have to remind people that the First Amendment protects your freedom of speech against government suppression, but it doesn't protect your freedom of speech against your employer making decisions on your employment. So we're seeing a lot of fallout from people on the left who've been celebrating Charlie Kirk's death being fired from their jobs, because it doesn't meet their standards, for their companies. And it's important to also know that when, in today's world, when you're hiring someone, you do go on and look at their social media profile. You look at their, you Google them. You could have all the pictures of them partying at fraternities and stuff showing up for their job interview, because all of that lives forever online. And it's important to, you have a right to say what you want to say, but it doesn't mean that can't be used against you in job interviews and things in the future. So sometimes it's better to hold your tongue. Will, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your role with Turning Point. There's a lot of young Republicans or college Republican groups out there. What makes Turning Point chapters at college campuses different than college Republican chapters?
I think the college Republicans, I'm not speaking about the Minnesota college Republicans. I don't know too much about them. I went to school in Nebraska. But the college Republicans are just a little bit bland. They show up and say, rah, rah, go Team Red, and that's fine and dandy and everything. But what makes Turning Point USA so interesting and so great is that they talk about the issues, and they push the issues. They push the envelope a little bit. They invite controversial speakers. They foster free speech. They foster free discussion about this stuff. I mean, that was Charlie Kirk's biggest thing, right? He'd show up on college campuses, and he would invite people to come up and disagree with him, and he'd probably teach them a thing or two.
Prove me wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
No, and I always thought that was great, and that's what he died doing, of course. But Turning Point became such a giant organization because it offered something different than the Republican clubs did, right? Mm-hmm. I think we should be taking notes on what's going on there as opposed to the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think the young people of today are hungry for a mission. I think they're hungry for to find a path where they feel fulfilled, and they're looking for happiness that is beyond instantaneous. I know they get a bad rap, but we are seeing a growth in young people, whether it be people joining churches, people getting involved with these kinds of organizations, perhaps on both sides. And again, we need to help our kids and help our young people learn how to critically think so they can discern which side they want to join. And that's on us. That's on all us. So, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Again, you're listening to Political Pitchforks, and we'll, again, be back in a couple minutes. Thanks.
Let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. This is Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and also William Beck, candidate for Minnesota House Seat 41B. So I want to move now into why you're running. And I would like you to kind of tell people a little bit more about yourself and maybe your family and what's important to you. Does that make sense, Jeremy? I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Well, why are you running?
That is a great question. And I've always hated talking about myself, and especially in this case, like, I'm not the product, right? Like, the product is a better life from the politicians in St. Paul, but I'll try to be the mechanism that gets that done. So I've been a conservative activist for a long time. I was tired of sitting on the sidelines. I thought, all right, well, I'm hearing all these excuses from the politicians in St. Paul. Let's check it out and see if we can actually get some stuff done. So I've served on Republican boards in the past. I'm on a leave of absence from the CD2 Republican board because I'm running for office. But before that, I was a chair of the Senate District 41 Republicans. And, of course, I've worked on several campaigns. I'm currently a charter school board member and a church youth leader.
You're busy.
And Will, your parents are also very active politically. So many of them, you want to name drop your two.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my mom was the former chair of the Ron Paul campaign in Minnesota in 2008 and 2012. And it's funny because my dad, he's very much not a Ron Paul guy. He is the chair of the CD5 Republican Party currently. So they both kind of went different directions. My mom, a little bit more the libertarian route, and my dad, the more, he's going to kill me for saying this, but the establishment route, I suppose.
I have to say, I met your mom long before I met your dad.
Yep.
Back, in around the 2010 kind of time period. And she participated in the John Adams Society, the debating club, and that's where I met her. And absolutely respected her sharp wit, for sure. And you're lucky to have grown up with a mom who shows you how women really can think, right?
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed all my experiences with your mom. So that tells me a lot about you, because you are willing to speak the truth, and she's a good person. She stood up for truth.
Appreciate that.
So
yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to get into politics, you better speak the truth. Otherwise, people are going to find out pretty quickly, and you're either going to not get elected or get unelected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which parent did you know first, Jeremy?
I knew Marianne, so yeah. I worked with her on the Ron Paul campaigns, and she was phenomenal at organizing, and Will is great at organizing and door knocking in grassroots politics, in retail politics. And Will has just been a stalwart out there, standing strong on so many issues of liberty, and I have so much respect for him, and I'm so excited. I've endorsed Will in his campaign. And this is to fill the spot for Tom Dippel, who's announced he's running for state senate. And Tom Dippel won the seat with only 50.9% of the vote in this last election. So this is a tough district, and I think, and I've long said, that people with a liberty platform can actually get more votes from people, which many in the establishment think of as being far right, but it's just being a constitutional conservative and being pro-liberty, like on freedom of speech, which is so important right now. And finding a pro-liberty candidate to run can actually reach across the aisle on so many more issues of civil rights and civil liberties than your typical establishment Republican can, who might be, supporting censorship and things like that in this day and age. So I think Will is the right candidate for this district, and he's also much in the mold of Tom Dippel, who's shown to be a great leader in that district.
Yeah, no, Tom is great. He's fought hard for the liberties of folks in our district, and I'm proud to have his endorsement as well. I think it's going to be a tough race for both him and I. They're both pretty much 50-50 districts, but I think we've both learned that it doesn't take a bomb thrower to win necessarily. Like, I'm not looking to go scorched earth with my campaign, but that doesn't mean I can't stand on truth and stand on the issues that matter most. You have to be willing to speak to people where they are and try to go from there. So I'm looking forward to it. It's early on. I wanted to announce my campaign at the same time as Tom's to try to let the folks in St. Paul know, hey, I'm running for this. I'm serious. I'm going to get started very early. And I hope we can avoid a primary, but we'll find out what happens.
I think this
Now,
issue.
so far, there isn't another Republican that is declared in this race. Is that right?
Yep. And I believe that's because I am consolidating support. I've been talking to a lot of Republican delegates. I do plan to abide by the Republican endorsement. So if somebody comes out of nowhere and manages to win the endorsement, I'll support them. But as of right now, I believe I'm doing a good job of consolidating people into my corner and getting those critical endorsements from legislators and liberty lovers.
I think it's amazing to me, this issue that you raised, Jeremy, really about liberty and standing on the principles upon which our country was founded. I mean, our country was founded for one reason, right? To create the right of the people to exercise these liberties.
Right.
And to have that be perceived as extremist when it's foundational. It's foundational. And when you destroy the foundation of something, it crumbles. So the only way that we can actually preserve the country that we live in is actually to rebuild that foundation, to strengthen it, to go back to it, really.
Totally.
And preserve it. And upon that foundation, all people have the right to speak their mind, practice whichever religion they practice, right? Understanding your rights and or mine begin. I don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with me, but we do have a duty to honor each other's rights. And this is one of the fundamental problems that I struggle with the party, because people who say what you said, Jeremy, you become divisive somehow. I'm divisive because I believe we should follow our principles. We should stand on them and be unafraid to speak that truth. So I'm so happy that we need more voices in our legislature, because as many people like you would say who've been there in the past, there's not enough people in our party willing to do that.
Well, and I think there are a lot of people who come into it with the right intentions, right? They want to be a loud voice for we the people, not necessarily we the corporations or the PACs or whatever. And unfortunately, they get co-opted by the St. Paul swamp, and they just go along with the status quo. They vote for the omnibus bills. They vote for more government. They vote for more taxes. So if that's me, if I am elected and I go to St. Paul and I start voting for all this stuff, I hope you guys will rightfully call me out, because I'll deserve it.
Yeah, I think we should be doing more of that calling out, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think our Republican Party should be actively engaged in holding legislators accountable who use the Republican name, who use the party resources, who then don't stand on the principles of the Republican Party.
Well, and there is an effort to silence those folks who are calling people out. I'm not talking about organizations necessarily. I'm talking about the grassroots folks who show up to caucus, show up to the conventions, actually make their voices heard and participate in the party endorsement. There's legislation filed in St. Paul, as you guys might know, to move the primary date up so that the person who has the most money and the most PAC support wins the primary and becomes the candidate, not who has the most support from their friends and neighbors, but who has the most money.
And much of that money comes from not Minnesota. Actually, much of that money comes from out state. And this is a very serious question, I think, that we should be talking about, is when you are bringing in tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps millions of dollars, they want us to believe that that money means nothing. If it means nothing, why are you pursuing it so, forcefully?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, will you pledge to not accept corporate PAC dollars?
Ooh,
For your
okay.
campaign?
You got me into a corner, because I don't know if I can commit to that. I want to, I'm leaning towards not accepting corporate PAC dollars. I do want to get as much money as I can from the grassroots. The problem is this is a 50-50 district. I'm going to need all the help I can get to get across the finish line. So, Jeremy, follow up with me in a couple months, and I'll have a better answer for you.
Okay.
I'm going to encourage you to try and put a value. If we could put a value on the grassroots door knocking for you, the grassroots wearing your T-shirts, the grassroots making those phone calls. In the end, those mailers,
Yeah.
they're important, kind of. Good mailers are really important. There's a lot of terrible mailers. But I just think, I believe people are increasingly hungry for looking candidates in the eye. I think they want to shake people's hands. I think they want to know the candidates. And I think too often the money allows people to avoid all that.
Yep.
It just lets them avoid that. And so I think that increasingly people are looking for real. They're looking for truth again. I hope so.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, and you're not going to win by sitting behind a computer, sitting behind a what have you. Like, I plan to knock as many doors as I can and meet as many people as I can. Both the cities in my community, Cottage Grove, Hastings, Denmark Township, and Inninger Township. Hastings in particular, if they don't know you, they're not going to vote for you. So I plan to meet as many people as I can, hear the issues that are important to them, and hopefully I can represent their interests in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you finding are well, we can talk after the break about the issues that you think are most important in your district. What else do you want to capture there, Susan, for topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know that you're interested in education. I know you're interested in the fraud problem, as that we all are, and certainly the economic issues facing Minnesotans. So we have a lot to talk about when we come back, and thanks for listening. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back, Patriot listeners. This is Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and William Beck, candidate for House seat 41B in Minnesota. And let's just jump right into these issues that you care about. It's great for people to hear your perspective and why they matter to you. So should we start with education?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, as you know, I mean, Minnesota has a problem with their reading and math scores. And Frank, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Minnesota has worse math scores than the state of Mississippi now, which that's Democrats' favorite talking point. Republicans are going to turn our state into Mississippi. But, folks, it's worse than Mississippi now under Democrat leadership. So we gotta look at some alternatives. I do think school choice is appropriate. I mean, Minnesota is the birthplace of public charter schools. I think we should encourage more public charter schools. I think we should encourage vouchers for private schools. The money should follow the student. The money doesn't. Nobody's entitled to that money as a school. I think when parents have more choice in their kids' education, their kids are better educated.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question about that. I have a lot of kids. We've homeschooled kids. I have some kids in the school. We've dealt with special ed issues. And there is a huge variance in school districts, depending on, it's not necessarily economics. It is philosophical oftentimes.
Yeah.
That affects some of this learning. And I think when we don't expect children to be able to learn, when we lower our standards so that everybody feels successful even when they aren't successful, we have a problem. And I think that we are not raising bars for our kids at all in school, and that's tragedy. Critical thinking has been under attack for decades, and as a parent, having watched and had discussions with teachers about the things that kids are allowed to do, and I one time had a teacher, it was 10 years ago maybe, who I raised a concern because I had a child who had written a paper that I knew that they had just copied, right? And I was told by the teacher, they all do that. And I said, well, do you fail all of them? Well, no, we can't fail them. I said, they all cheated. If they go to college, they could be expelled. I mean, there are literally colleges will expel you for that. So it was just interesting to me, the perspective, well, they just all do it. What?
Well, Will, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Kind of half education, half healthcare. One of the issues that came up when I was elected, and this was before COVID, was this requirement that school kids have to have be vaccinated and can't have religious or personal exemptions to that law. And it's amazing because supporting freedom in healthcare wasn't just a conservative issue. That was mostly liberals and your granola style parents coming out to the Capitol to support freedom in healthcare. Where are you on the vaccine mandates, especially if at the federal level they eliminate certain vaccines from the requirements? I'm sure Minnesota is going to try to push for requiring these vaccines. Where are you at on this?
Yeah, I'm totally for vaccine choice. That doesn't make me anti-vaccine necessarily. I think, there are some vaccines we should look at, but, parents should make that decision for their kids. Parents know their kids best. While we can respect the knowledge and experience that many doctors have, they look at your kid for a couple minutes and then they make a judgment. Whereas parents, they're literally raising these kids. So, if it becomes an issue, if you're concerned about sending your kid to a school with kids that aren't vaccinated, you don't have to send your kid to public school. It should be about the choice of how you raise your kids. And so, to answer your question directly, I'm totally opposed to vaccine mandates. I don't know if I would go as far as the state of Florida has and totally eliminated any vaccine requirements or recommendations, but I would have to look at that more. I'm totally against vaccine mandates. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Great. Oh, that's a great answer. The another question I have for you is on gun laws. As you know, Tim Walz is going to be calling a special session to try to pass gun laws, more gun restrictions in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. And he's going to be using this. I wouldn't be surprised if the bill was like the Charlie Kirk, gun control bill, which of course it looks like the shooter used a bolt action, not a high capacity gun, but a bolt action rifle that most of us have in our gun safes for hunting, like a 30-06. Where are you on gun rights? And do you support constitutional carry? Do you support permit carry? Would you support any restrictions on gun ownership?
Yeah, I mean, what you saw with the Annunciation School shooting was a deranged person went in and shot a bunch of kids. And guess what? Minnesota has a red flag law, and the law didn't work. It did not stop the shooting. That person should not have been able to do that under these current laws. All that to say, gun control laws do not work. So yes, I absolutely support constitutional carry. I think that's huge. I think it's important that people have the free ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights. Plain and simple. I mean, I understand the desire to institute more laws. I think there are people out there that are scared. I think some people's reaction to tragedies like this is, oh, we need more laws. We got to do something. Well, there's not always something that can be done. It's been proven over and over again that gun control does not work. If a deranged person wants to hurt somebody, they're going to find a way to hurt somebody. Look at Europe. They're using knives, bow and arrows, acid attacks to harm people.
There was,
so sad.
just in North Carolina, right before this Charlie Kirk problem, this young innocent woman was sitting on a train, and a guy stabs her repeatedly, right in front of 4 people who obviously were uncomfortable, saw something was going on, and this woman bled to death right there because he had a pocket knife. It wasn't even like we hear sometimes about machetes, or it was literally a pocket knife. He was a known mentally ill, repeat offender guy who had been freed by a judge, right, again. And people with this kind of mental illness cannot be controlled. And it's very rare that you would see a perfectly sane, rational person ever just decide to go and harm another person. It never happens like that.
Right.
So I feel like they will use their cars, they will use poison. There's no stopping them. So the only thing we can do is let people protect themselves.
Right.
That's it. There's nothing else. And that's, by the way, why we have the right to carry in the first place. Mm-hmm. It was for the right to protect yourself, really, from the government.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
there was also recently a court ruling that allows 18-year-olds to be issued permits to carry. As you know, the Second Amendment doesn't have it doesn't say it's at 21 or 25, and so the Supreme Court found that that these permit laws should apply to all adults, in Minnesota, and so now it's been extended to people who might be returning from the military at age 20 and work a late shift and would like to carry their firearm for self protection. So there might be legislation pushing back on that coming through the legislature.
By the way, if they actually had the nerve to name a law after Charlie Kirk, I just don't think Charlie Kirk would think the solution to his murder would be to take away the rights of the citizens of the United States.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
It would be unbelievably disrespectful, actually.
Yeah. Well, and he used a simple hunting rifle. We're not going to ban hunting rifles, are we? Is that even part of the conversation? Maybe someday it will be, but
I think it has been part of the conversation in some of these.
And even for mass shootings, where there's multiple casualties, one of the most dangerous weapons to have is a shotgun with buckshot or slugs. This is one of the most destructive firearm patterns, and where you don't even have to aim, and those are readily available. Everyone who has guns probably has a shotgun as well, and they always talk about the AR-15s being so dangerous. Well, shotguns are actually more destructive. Well, if you outside of the main talking points for Republicans running for the endorsement, what legislation do you think that you would like to sponsor and carry? How would you like to change government? Maybe it's on the emergency powers of the governor, trying to reassert the legislature's authority on things, or rein in control from state agencies. What specific issues would you like to advance?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned it right there, the Never Again bill, a bill to totally overhaul how the governor is able to use his emergency powers. I think that's critical. I think if we've learned anything from the COVID lockdowns, it's that we need some kind of reform there. I don't think it's an issue that should go away. I know politicians in St. Paul are trying to treat it that way, but I would totally introduce that or sign on to that, give it procedural votes, whatever needs to get done. I also want to introduce bills that will make life more affordable for Minnesotans. And they're not talking about this in St. Paul, but we have one of the highest corporate taxes, one of the highest sales taxes, and one of the highest income taxes. I would be totally okay with doing away with the income tax if we could. I'd be totally okay with talking about property tax reform. Property taxes are getting ridiculous. I know that's a local level issue, but maybe some action does need to be taken at the state. So that's something I'm going to look into a little bit more. Of course, I want to expand freedoms for people to sell things from their homes. I know that there's action taken on the cottage foods law. I think people should be able to sell whatever they want from their home as long as they're being, a little responsible. I think there should be some guardrails there, but, let people do what they want. Let people earn an income. So all that and more. I could go on and on, but I don't want to talk.
So you think that kids should have lemonade stands if they want? In other words,
Ooh.
without a license?
That's a little extreme, don't you think, Susan?
Well, I would encourage you to check out the Food Freedom Act, because that's a bill that I carried and introduced. It's passed in other states. It allows people to sell anything for food as long as they disclose that it wasn't made in a commercial kitchen, which, as long as the buyer's okay with it, these laws that have passed haven't increased any foodborne illness. So these are great bills.
I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you for listening to Political Pitchforks. We'll be back in a couple of minutes for the last segment of the show.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280, The Patriot. I am Susan Smith. I'm here with Jeremy Munson and William Beck, candidate for Minnesota House seat 41B. And so I think in this last segment, I kind of want to address the elephant in the room, so to speak, Action for Liberty. And as everybody probably knows, that Action for Liberty often gets pilloried by various members of that establishment that was mentioned earlier, often defended by liberty-minded patriots. And I'm one of those people. I was actually told that there was a candidate who thought I was actually like being paid by Action for Liberty. Not true. I do attend Action for Liberty events. I support the goals of Action for Liberty, but I don't always agree with everything Action for Liberty does, and nobody does. That's the reality. I definitely have a concern about the amount of time the party has spent attacking Action for Liberty, because I think it really has cast aspersions on really wonderful people who are connected to Action for Liberty. And again, it's an organization that exists. It fundraises. It raises money. That's its goal. Sometimes it doesn't always have the solutions I want them to have. And I'm very open with the people who run it about that. I would like to see more solutions come from Action for Liberty and their proposals and their discussions. That being said, we need Action for Liberty because they educate and motivate people about serious issues. And often they do start with the Republican Party because we all should expect more of the Republican Party than we expect of Democrats. We know what Democrats are going to do, and they do it. We want Republicans to be Republican. And when they aren't, then the AFRL holds them accountable. I don't have any problem with that, and nobody should. We should all try to be better and rise. So you, I'm sure, are going to be identified as being connected to Action for Liberty, and I'm okay with that. You know, and I think most people will be, but not everybody. So why don't you address it? Talk to us.
Yeah. Well, look, I've done lots of work with Action for Liberty in the past. As a contractor, of course, I ran their state fair booth in, oh boy, was it 2023, maybe? And that was a lot of fun. They have a great fair booth if you haven't been. But look, they're a conservative organization. They're like conservative organizations, and they're unlike other organizations. They believe in the confrontational political model, which, as you mentioned, calls out Republicans when they do bad. They also target Democrats, too.
Tim Walz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's on display for everyone to see. Now, look, I'm not a quote-unquote Action for Liberty candidate. If I don't even know what that means necessarily.
Right.
But,
nobody does.
Look, I talk to everybody. I'm having lunch next week with a retired legislator who's a quote-unquote establishment guy.
Right.
So I think the conversations are important. Look at Charlie Kirk. He made a career out of having conversations with people. If we don't have conversations, we're not going to have a functioning political organization. We're not going to function as a society. So, yeah, I talk to everybody. Tom Dippel, who I'm hoping to replace, he talks to anybody too. He invites Democrats to come to his office and have conversations about these issues. I plan to do the same thing. I think that's what a representative does. They listen to what the people have to say.
Yeah. How about you former Action for Liberty guy, Jeremy?
Yeah, look, when I ran, I was the CD1 chair. I was the chair of the Republican Party for the 21 counties in southern Minnesota. My legislator resigned, and I ran for his seat in a special. I won. I was about 2 weeks away from the endorsement when Tony Lalonde from Action for Liberty called me. I'd never met him before. And he kind of asked me about where I stood on issues and realized I was pro-liberty and started making phone calls for me. And that action triggered the HRCC to like double down on their support of someone else in that race. And then even though I won the endorsement, they primaried me. They called me Action for Liberty. And when I won, when I was in St. Paul as a legislator in caucus, you know, Kurt Dowd would point at me and every time he mentioned the word Jake Duesenberg or Action for Liberty. And I finally stood up and said, "What the F, man?" Like, you know, like they so many of the people in the establishment who are called out for not being Republican like to just smear people by calling them Action for Liberty people. And it's a way of them, you know, just trying to bucket people into this category and justify using Republican Party dollars against endorsed candidates, calling them Action for Liberty. It's wrong. Action for Liberty's style of politics, this confrontational model, I think there's value in it. I do support it from time to time. Some of the campaigns, so to speak, that Action for Liberty runs are things that I don't necessarily agree with, you know, spending that money or resources in doing that. Do they raise money? Of course they raise money. So does the Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. So does every other group that wants to advocate because it's expensive to get your message out. Is Mortensen and Jake Duesenberg driving around in Ferraris? No. Just like the Door brothers from the National or whatever the Minnesota Gun Rights Group. I went over to visit them one time. The main guy from the door group is driving like a 1983 Honda that's rusted out that barely supports his weight.
By
I'm
the way,
surprised he hasn't fallen through.
I'm pretty sure if
So,
they had the
like,
money, they'd be getting like a dually
yeah.
F-350 something.
Yeah.
So, they're not self-enriching themselves.
Right.
They are raising money to get their message out.
Yeah.
And just like the Republican Party should be doing and everything else. So, but I hope that they don't try to primary you solely based on the fact that you're willing to talk to all the groups that are involved in this, because that would be sad. And in a race like this, we need to unify behind the endorsed candidate. So I'm glad that you're going to support the endorsement and wish you luck.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I don't think it's Kurt Dout's HRCC for what it's worth. I think it's become harder to attack legislators for this because there are more legislators now who are at least friendly to Action for Liberty. It's a different world. I hope the HRCC and I can get along, but if not, when I win the endorsement, I'll just do the best I can to win the primary and then go on to win the general. It's as simple as that.
Well, one thing that the Action for Liberty folks do well, and I say folks meaning the actual organization, is they're good at marketing, which is one thing that Republicans have continually failed at.
Right.
When I was elected, and I would have conversations with guys at Action for Liberty or Jake Duesenberg and Tony, and talk about legislation that I was working at and asking for advice on how to advance it when we were running a surplus and I wanted to give the money back to the people, and I was trying to figure out how to pitch an idea to give money back to people in the manner in which it was paid in, and they came up with this idea of just the Give It Back Act. Like, hey, let's just call it the Give It Back Act and just give everybody back, an equal amount of surplus. And unfortunately, it's a little bit redistribution, but they do really well at messaging, like the Never Again bill, even though there's nuances of that bill that I disagree with and rewrote a better bill. The idea that just never again should we let this happen is really good branding. And that's something that like Democrats do well is messaging and branding. And we need to be better at it. And the folks at Action for Liberty and other groups like them have really good ideas on messaging, and they shouldn't be poo-pooed by the establishment. Will, what's your website, and how can people get involved with your campaign? Donate their time or resources?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would tell you to do is go follow me on Facebook. It's Beck from Minnesota House. If you search that, you'll find me. On X, I am Beck 4MN. We're currently working on a website. As I mentioned earlier, it's the early stages. So that'll be up probably next week, I think. Yeah, and look, we're looking for volunteers early on. If you happen to live in or nearby the Hastings or Cottage Grove area, I'd love to talk to you. Just follow me on social media, send me a DM, and I'd love to hear from you.
Will you be signing the public subsidy agreement so that people that donate to your campaign from Minnesota can receive a rebate on their donation?
I really debated this one because the public subsidy agreement has its issues. But, we need to win before we start changing state laws, right? So I did sign the public subsidy. If you donate $75 or $150 per couple, you'll get that receipt and the state will refund you for your contribution.
I think it's important that it's like when you play Monopoly and some people use free parking and some people don't. Like they put money in the middle and then other people don't. You got to play by the rules that exist when you play the game, because that's the game you're playing. And I think if you don't like the rules, then once you get there, you can say we should really revisit these rules. And I think that's important, right?
Totally.
Because if you don't, that's how they keep people out, right? So I think it's great. You shouldn't feel bad about that. I think that's the system that we have, and I'd much rather see those PCR dollars, frankly, flowing to candidates directly than flowing to parties and to the BPOUs. I think the more we fund the candidates that we believe in, the better. That's what we should be doing, and it puts the power back where it belongs.
Well, as a former party, I'm still on the CD2 board, I will still tell you that donate to your preferred candidate.
Right. Yep. I think that's important. Well, I think it's going to be an interesting, we're almost, out of time. And I think this 2026 cycle is one of the most important we faced. Really it is. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. That we should be expecting, I think, not an easy ride. I think we should be expecting a rough ride, and we should be preparing for that. And these elections are really important. Donald Trump needs to maintain a majority, or we're going to go back to 2018.
Yep.
So let's hope that in Minnesota, you're able to jump on board and start helping promote the liberties that we should all cherish and embrace. And thanks, Jeremy, for being here, and you, William. And we look forward to talking to you guys again next week.
Thank you, guys.